At insuremyride.com.au, we know what it's like on the bike. So our bike insurance is only for bike riders. Whatever you ride, road, off-road and even scooter. Don't get ripped off. Insure your ride online and save 25%.
I'm Spannerman and welcome to Motorcycle Television. Here we are with one of the bikes in our current 3 challenge. Just to refresh your memory, what the editor did was give 3 teams $3,333.33 to go to trademotorcycles.com.au and buy a used bike. Now, the 3 teams have selected the bikes. They've come over to my workshop today so that I can examine them and see what's hiding beneath the glossy paintwork. What are the problems with these bikes, if any, and what's going to be required to fix them? This old girl is a BMW K100 and it's an 84 model. It's the oldest of the 3 bikes that have been selected by the teams in the 3 challenge. When you're looking at an older bike and trying to assess its value or trying to assess its technical ability, its roadworthiness, you have to do a lot more work than you do with modern bikes, simply because just about everything will be showing some signs of wear. This is a compression tester and I've just completed a compression check on the engine and it's come up remarkably consistently at about 140 psi, which is very good. It means that the engine's still got a lot of life left in it. Some of the features of the bike that you might notice include the front fork seals, which are showing no sign of leaking, no sign of any kind of oil issue from the forks themselves, which is good. It's very difficult to buy a bike this age and not end up with some kind of problem with leaking fork seals. The front brakes are good. We've measured them. They're actually above BMW specifications because they're not original rotors. So at some stage this bike's had new rotors put on and they're a little thicker than the original, but certainly they'll last the life of the rest of the bike. Pads too are also good. There are quite a few different types of brake pads. This is a more conventional pad, but this one has a groove cut in it and you can see down the groove, and that's actually a wear line. So you don't have to pull the front end of the bike apart to see what kind of condition the brakes are in. It's helpful if you have a small torch so you can shine it in and do a visual inspection of how much meat is left on the brake pads. While I'm at the front of the bike, it's a good time to check the performance of the steering head bearings, what kind of condition they're in. Now we can do it on a BMW because BMW has a centre stand. Neither of the other 2 bikes in this challenge have, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to do this, particularly if you don't have the right equipment. In this particular instance, I can lift the front wheel off the ground and attempt to rock the forks back and forth. Now if there's play in the steering head, if there's any significant play, I'll be able to feel it while I'm doing that. And I can't feel any at all. So that's a good sign. With the bike on the centre stand and the front wheel raised, you can move the bars from side to side. And what you're trying to do here is feel for any notchiness. Often it occurs in the dead ahead position. So if you feel like you're falling into a little slot and then pushing out of it, it usually means that the steering head bearings are worn and will need to be replaced. On this bike, surprisingly, the front end is very good. With front suspension we check oil leaks because again damping can be seriously affected, and if you don't have any damping the bike will just pogo. The front shocks on this particular bike are giving some indications of starting to leak oil. You can see a ring of oil around the fork where the fork's compressed to, so the oil's being pushed up and the dust guards are creating these little rings which indicate that the fork seals on this bike will need to be replaced soon. This bike's now 29 years old, so you can expect it to have some wear and tear on it. Team Experience that bought this bike had in the back of their minds that next year, when it's 30 years old, it will be eligible for club or red plate registration in any state in Australia. It makes a huge difference to the cost of actually owning something like this because you're not up for $600 a year. The under-seat area of a bike can tell you a lot about how the bike's been looked after over its years. BMW, as is typical with them, does a wonderful job with its under-seat presentation. It's easy to open the seat, and they've actually got a little lock mechanism there to hold it open for you. Under this cover is a small tool kit area where you can keep your registration papers and little bits and pieces. And at the back of the bike there's a cover too with a little facility, probably for wet weather gear, but in this particular case the original toolkit is stored there. If you have a look at this, this is a beautiful toolkit. This is a typical, genuine, original BMW toolkit. And the fact that it's still here indicates that the bike's been cared for over the length of time it's been owned. It's also nice to see original stickers still on the bits that should have them. Of the 3 bikes in the 3 Challenge, only one of them has a shaft drive, and it's the BMW K100. There are still bearings in the wheels though, and one way of checking to see whether the bearings are up to scratch is to attempt to shake the rear wheel from side to side. One hand on each side, good solid push. I can't feel any movement in that, which suggests to me that the rear wheel bearings are in good condition. These tyres are certainly roadworthy, they're certainly legal because the only real measure for that is tread depth. But the rubber feels very firm to me. It'll be interesting when Cam Donald gets this bike on a racetrack to see how the tyres heat up. The front tyre is a Metzeler, a Laser Tech, which is the new version of the old famous ME33. But the rear tyre is actually a Bridgestone Battle Axe. Now, often when you match or mismatch tyres, you'll end up with some kind of steering problems. Not major problems, but the bike may not respond the way it should. In this particular case, this rear tyre and the front tyre seem to be a pretty good match because the bike stays stable at speed. This model BMW was the company's first 4-cylinder motorcycle, and it takes a lot of engineering to build a motorcycle engine. BMW skipped most of that by just taking one of its existing car engines and turning it on its side. Were you to take this engine out and stand it upright, it would look very much like a conventional car engine. Tipped on its side, we've got the head up this end, and on the other side of the engine you've got the sump. But it's good because you can get at the spark plugs easily, and you can see most of the components of the engine. Because it's a car engine, it doesn't rev exactly the same way a specific motorcycle designed engine would rev, but you get lots of torque, and it's got great pulling power. It runs out of steam a little bit earlier than the other 2 bikes. Even in its launch period, top speeds were around 215 to 220 kilometres an hour. We wouldn't expect that from this little darling at this stage of her life, but I'd be very surprised if it wouldn't sit comfortably on 180 plus. Here's the second bike in our 3 Challenge, a Yamaha YZF 1000R, better known probably at the time as a Thunder Race. This is an amazing bike, given that there was some negotiation involved, but it ended up costing Team Superior about $3,000. This bike was produced between 1996 and 2003, and it was run alongside the R1 Yamaha. So for a while you could either select an R1 or this bike. And this bike kept selling because it was more comfortable. It was a more practical bike than the R1, which had a much narrower focus. It has many of the R1's features, including its brakes, and it's certainly got almost R1 engine performance. It's not bad to think that you can spend $3,000 and get a bike capable still of about 280 kilometres an hour. As you can see just from the general appearance of this bike, it's in excellent condition. The previous owner obviously loved it and took very good care of it. We've checked many of the vital components of the bike and they all measure up as being in serviceable condition. One of the things you should probably always do when you buy a second-hand bike is change all the fluids. You can get an idea of the condition of a bike from its underseat area, so let's have a look at underneath the Thunder Race. Front seat comes away easily. There we go. The presentation is very neat and relatively clean. None of the bikes are particularly clean, and I blame the three teams for this. If I was an entrant in this competition, I would have gone to a little bit more trouble. We've had a bit of trouble starting the VTR 1000, so it's prompted me to check the battery condition on all the bikes. As you can see, the battery here is holding nearly 13 volts, which is just about perfect. The Thunder Ace has one of those U-Butte really good looking gold chains. From looking at the sprockets, both front and back, I think the drive equipment is about 1,000 kilometres old. So again, this bike's got plenty of life left in it in terms of its drivetrain. If you look at the marks for adjustment, they're about consistent with a chain that's about 1,000 kilometres old. The sprockets are in such good condition that you could expect reasonably to get 25 to 30,000 kilometres. We've been paying particular attention to oil leaks in the suspension, both front and back. Here's a shock absorber damper unit that we prepared earlier for you, just to give you some idea of what you're actually looking for. This one has a patina on the actual shock body, which is a mist of oil, and it's collected road grime, and it's a clear indication that the shock has actually been leaking oil. Now, if that happens, what it means is you don't get the same kind of damping, or you don't get the damping that the shock was designed for. And that's a problem, and it will need to be replaced because it affects the handling of the bike. If you look carefully here, we have cleaned a little section, and that's what the body should look like, but as you can see, it looks very grubby otherwise. Here's the third bike in the 3 challenge, and this was purchased by Team Young Gun, the young guys on our magazine at the moment. They picked a Honda VTR 1000 Firestorm. It's a 1998 model, so it's the newest of the bikes in the 3 challenge. Like the Yamaha, it's been very well looked after as well. Visually, it's near, well, I won't say showroom because, as I said earlier, none of the teams paid a lot of attention to actually cleaning them before they presented them for inspection. But it's in very good condition and would clean up very nicely. It's another great buy, considering that this bike was $3,000 as well. A bit of negotiation took place, but it left the team with $300 to spend on the few little things that they thought were necessary for the bike. It did come with a few small problems, a few small electrical gremlins with the instruments, including the indicators. The flasher can had to be replaced. But the big problem this bike had when it was purchased was the front discs were warped. So when you pulled the brake in, you got that throbbing, pulsing feeling through the brake handle. So the front disc brakes had to be replaced. To keep within the $3,333 limit, Team Young Gun bought a set of rotors from China. Now, people are still have mixed feelings about whether Chinese equipment is any good, but one of the members of Team Young Gun, Rod Chapman, has a set of these on the bike that he uses pretty much on a daily basis, and he's done about 40,000 K on them without any problem. It's accompanied by a new set of disc pads as well, so it's pointless measuring these. Well, I did. They're 5mm, which is Honda standard width for the brakes, but the front brake system is as close to original as you can get. One of the issues we've had with this bike since it was acquired is that it's been a little bit difficult to start. It's been temperamental. Sometimes it will start, sometimes it won't. I've been checking the charging system and the condition of the battery itself. When it does start, it sounds magnificent. We'll take the seat off the bike now and just check with a multimeter what the condition of the battery is and whether or not the charging system's working properly. The battery is in this little compartment under the seat, and it's on an angle. And we'll start the bike. Well, before we do that, let's just check the capacity of the battery when the engine isn't running. That's reading 13.1 volts, which is an indication that the battery is capable of holding that much electricity. So that's actually a good sign. When we start the bike and rev the engine, that should go up to about 14.5 or possibly as high as 15, which indicates that the charging system is working. Let's try it. So there's a revelation. The voltmeter, my voltmeter, is telling me that the charging system on the VTR isn't performing as it should. What should happen is when the engine is revved up to about 3000 RPM, the amount of charge going to the battery should be about 14.5 volts. In this particular case, it wasn't increasing from the standard setting of the battery, which is around 13 volts. The chain and sprockets on the VTR are approximately half worn. The sprockets are in good condition still, and so is the chain. The indicators suggest that there's still possibly 10,000 kilometres left in them, but they will need to be replaced at some stage in the not too distant future. Sprockets wear fairly evenly, but in a particular way. This is a relatively new sprocket, and you can see the channels or the little divots or the little valleys in the sprocket. Ideally, the high bits are straight, and that's a very even surface. The distance and the shape of the valley is consistent. This is a used sprocket. It's still serviceable, but you can see where the chain has been pushing against the teeth and wear has started, and the tooth is just starting to bend slightly to the right. This is why you need to change your chains and sprockets pretty much as a set. Generally, the underseat area of the VTR indicates another careful owner, someone who's kept the bike clean and has gone to a lot of trouble to make sure the bike stays in top condition. The frame, from a close inspection, reveals no indication of crash damage. The plastic's in good condition. All the wiring is original, so it hasn't been played around with at all, and it's even got the original Honda toolkit. Another minor problem with this VTR is that there is a very slight notch in the steering head bearings. It's not noticeable actually when you're on the road, but if you do the normal test, which is to get the front wheel off the ground and move the bars back and forward, you feel it sliding in and out of the notch. Again, it's serviceable at the moment, it's roadworthy, but it's something that's going to have to be attended to in the near future. Like every bike in the 3 Challenge, I see this bike as being exceptional value as well. I'm amazed at what's actually available on trademotorcycles.com.au for around this price range. You get something which delivers excellent performance, which is in a condition that's likely to give you many years of satisfying use, and you're not going to break the bank investing in it.